You're so used to saying to people, well, stress just, it increases the way we experience pain. But as you asked me, neurologically, what's going on there? It's complicated.
It is complicated, but I think it's super helpful to have a little bit more visual around it, because we've all heard stress. And I feel like that is a word that just it's a little bit overused and abused, right? And
definitely. And what even actually is it,
Yeah. And the idea, stress is also normal. Stress is something that we use for growth, right? There's lots of different ways of stress. So I think it's helpful to dive a little bit deeper to help
definitely
people understand how it operates.
Well, when you listen back, I hope it made sense.
It did. Welcome to the Mindfulness in Motion podcast, the show that helps you move beyond the checklist of life and into a world of joy and meaning and discovery. I'm your host, Corey Micah, and we are delighted to have our listeners here with us today. And we're especially excited to have Nadine with us today. She's a specialist in helping women overcome back pain with her unique, supple, strong, and supported strategy. So whether you're recovering from an injury, managing chronic pain, or just want to move with more confidence and ease, this is a conversation for you. Let's dive in. Welcome, Natalie. Natalie. It's doing that in my brain over and over. I'm like, it's not Natalie.
You're not the first, don't worry. Hello, it's lovely to be here with you.
Oh, goodness. Well, welcome. Thanks for being on the show today. Tell us a little bit about your story and how you got into helping people with managing their pain.
Sure. So if I'm completely honest, I'll keep it as succinct as possible. But truly, my story goes back to being 4 years old. And I remember being in the first year of primary school here in the UK. We call it reception. So I was about 4 or 5 years old. And we were doing a project where we had to draw a painting of what we wanted to be when we were older. And I remember really agonizing at 4 years old, would I like to be a teacher? Would I like to be an artist? Would I like to be a dentist? And so on. And I really remember going home over several nights trying to decide what it was. And I decided eventually that I would do my self-portrait of me as a nurse. But my love for chronic pain actually was born out of my own injury. So
that's an ironic way of putting it. My love for chronic pain.
Yeah, so I guess my love for helping people overcome chronic pain and truly my fascination with pain. So, the irony is not lost on me as a chiropractor, that I then went through my own suffering. So in about end of 2017, beginning of 2018, I sustained an injury that gave me significant back pain and some muscle weakness in that area. It was an injury that I knew clinically was going to have quite a significant healing time because there was a bit of nerve damage, and nerves do heal very slowly. So I knew that it was going to be a period of several months, maybe a year. But unfortunately, at the same time, I was going through a very stressful period in my life. And it took a long time to realize the link, but the stress, which sort of accumulated and led to me feeling quite on edge and anxious and tearful and really struggling to get good, consistent sleep, actually meant that this injury became more uncomfortable than it ought to have been, and the healing time was quite prolonged. And fortunately, the stressful situation came to a head, and I had a period of time to really start to focus on myself, and I really focused on my own healing. And I think the biggest thing that I took from that stage of my journey was that overcoming back pain goes really beyond the sort of physical, biomechanical steps of releasing tight muscles or loosening off joints that are perhaps a bit stiff and stuck. And actually, when I started to focus on my mental well-being and how my whole nervous system was functioning, coming back to a place that felt much more calm and balanced, that's really when huge progress was seen. And about 18 months ago, I went through pregnancy, and I also had some pains during pregnancy. But I realized at this time that they also coincided with being very low in energy and sort of my stores, my energy system being quite depleted. And so, again, that gave me a new level of understanding of just how important the power of nutrition and rest and sleep are in the role that they play in pain. So I've now taken all of these areas, these biomechanical things and these more supportive pillars such as nutrition and sleep, from my own experience and the clinical experience that I've had over 11 years. And I've started to formulate them into a strategy that can be really adapted to each individual person. But that is the basis of how I got to my supple, strong, supported strategy and how I overcame my back pain.
Got it. Let's go back to where you've had this injury.
Yes.
And so there's the mechanical piece of it that you knew it would take time because nerves are slow to heal. But then realizing that this stressors and other stressors in your life really where it's influencing the healing. I just had to pause, and I'm going to say this. If anybody has listened to lots of my podcasting or my videos, they know I have a coughing thing. And I'm pointing that out right now because I'm very in tune to there is an emotional stressor for me and the cough. So it is triggered by that. And that's what I want us to focus on and talk about for a second. So talk to us about what you know of how our environmental stressors, whatever those particularly are, how they affect the body. Why does that contribute to
Absolutely.
pain in your back and other physiological symptoms and effects that we have in our body?
Definitely. This is such a great question. And it's an incredibly complex question to answer. And one that when we look at the sort of research and the science, we're still, as clinicians trying to get to grips with exactly what's happening and the best way to kind of condense and disseminate this information. But I think one of the key things where I see many of my own clients confused is that we tend to think about pain as something that comes into the body. You touch this thing and it causes pain, but that's actually incorrect. Pain is an output. So we have a particular sensation. Let's say there's a hot candle and you put your hand too close to the flame and your body registers using the temperature receptors in the end of your fingers, and those messages travel up your arm, they reach your spinal cord, they go up to your spinal cord, to your brain, and your brain says, the candle flame is too hot, and if you leave your hand there, you're going to burn the tissues and damage them. So you'll register this stimulus as a threat, and it sends an output, which is pain, and you withdraw your hands. So that's a really sort of simple explanation of pain based on something that's got the potential to cause tissue damage on the basis the brain perceived the stimulus as threatful.
That's great. And I'll just interrupt for a second to highlight that point. I don't want us to miss that point, that pain is an output from the brain. Absolutely. I haven't heard it expressed in that particular way, but yes, that's exactly,
Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. We talk to students about that all the time, right? Yeah. That
a lot of our senses in a way are output. Like, I'm not into optics, but light comes into your eyes, and the way the brain sort of makes sense of that, the output is the image of what we see. So that's how pain works, on the basis of something that's able to cause tissue damage. But there are lots of other factors that prime how our body perceives the environment. So when we are exposed, let's say, to some long-term emotional stress, because of the complex neurological and hormonal kind of cascades that happen when we're under chronic stress, the body is much more likely to perceive its surrounding environment as threatful, even if that response is almost inappropriate. So it may be that something, you hear the post come through your letterbox and it makes a sort of clanging sensation. And because you're edgy and anxious, something that normally would just be a kind of clinking sound in the background suddenly makes you jump, for example. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Because the one example I always use for folks is why we watch movies or TV shows.
Yes.
And we have a physiological response to the dangerous scene on the TV, even though there's absolutely nothing wrong in our environment, because we have this idea inputted into our brain. So our output of our body is a stress response.
Absolutely.
Our brain doesn't know the difference between, there's no quote unquote bad guy getting us, but we're observing it. And so we're having that same stress response or joy response or sad response, tears coming down our faces or laughing. All of these physiological output responses are at the effect of somebody else's idea.
Absolutely. And there's so many different things that prime the body's, just our physiology, how our cells are sort of operating biologically and how inflamed our system is. So, lack of sleep and nutrition are really good examples of these. If we're not getting good quality sleep and we're not getting the right nutrition in our body, it will literally be in a more inflamed state, which makes pain more likely. But I think to go back to your question about the nervous system, it's really about the body's and the brain's ability to make sense of the world around us, how much threat we perceive there to be. And actually, when you're going into a stressful scenario day after day, the body starts to almost predict the sort of pattern that it's going to be engaging in.
Sure.
I hope that makes sense.
That totally makes sense. And then I think, we have our own in the moment experiment with my cough, right? The cough has now become habitual. Like that's as much as my process to let go of the cough is to letting go of that habit. There was some stimulus, right? It was an emotional connection from who knows how long, and it's something I've patterned to. And so, yes, I have that repeated pattern that has just keeps going over and over again. So I can see this piece of the connection, how pain in other parts of your body, in your back, and your system here, right? That we're looking at these different areas.
Yeah.
How well are you taking care of your body as a whole, or is your body, what kind of condition your body is as a whole? And
definitely
then your environment.
And it gets, I was just going to say, it gets to the state where the pain is no longer about the injury or the damage in the tissues, which was the initial sort of stimulus of the pain. It's around, those other kind of holistic factors in your life that then you're not interpreting appropriately, and they become the mechanism behind the pain.
Absolutely. Yeah. I remember I was working with a PT once, actually with back pain that I was having. And they had me watch this video. A guy was talking about walking in the outback and he got bit.
Yes.
Do you know this one? He got bit by some very poisonous snake, and it didn't cause, as I recall the stories, it didn't cause pain in the moment. But, he nearly loses his life, right? It's a big thing. Obviously he survives because he tells a story about it. But then the next time he's out walking about and there's a little twig that snaps and touches his leg and he completely flips out. Mm-hmm. And it's because now his system is triggered to, oh my gosh, this could be that snake again, even though there was no snake.
Yes. Precisely. Yeah. We are the sum of everything that has ever happened to us.
Yeah. So how are you helping people through? I know you have some strategies on helping people through this kind of, there's 3 different pillars, but this first pillar with the mindful part, what's some of your simple strategies that you have for people to start to unlock that?
So if we sort of dive into the first pillar is supple, and this really speaks to 2 important areas. The first is more obvious. It speaks to muscle flexibility and joint mobility. And the second part is what I call our stress responsiveness, how supple, how elastic that stress response is, because really we want to operate from a sort of balanced set point, and then some stress comes along in our life, as it does, that's normal, and our body is able to sort of snap into action, respond to the stress, and then we need it to come back down to that set point. So when it comes to the muscular flexibility and joint mobility, one of the areas where I feel my practice has really shifted is away from the more generic, let's take your back over to the side and stretch and hold like this for 30 seconds, and now twist to the other side and hold like that for 30 seconds. I find a lot of people are aware of a handful of stretches that they might have learned in physical education classes at school, or they see something on YouTube, but so often by the time they get to me, that's not worked for them. The sheet of exercises that the physiotherapist or the doctor gave them are not helping. So in terms of mindful movement, I've really moved into a sort of paradigm where we use creative movement to help people. So one of my favorite go-to exercises for somebody, let's say, who's experiencing a lower back problem is to have them stand up. In fact, I can show you if you would like. So I'd have them stand up, and we don't focus on how far apart you want to put your legs, or whether your knees should be bent or stiff or whatever. Just get someone to stand. And then I ask them to imagine that they've got a string around their leg, and the string extends down and it's dangling a pen so that the pen tip touches the floor. And I ask them to start to move their hips and their pelvis and their back in such a fashion as they imagine they're drawing out the letters of the alphabet. And so that pen on the floor is starting to trace those letters out for them. And suddenly it's a completely creative shift. The brain is not thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so stiff, I'm going to bend down and try to touch my toes to feel a stretch, but I've done that 58 times and it always hurts every time my hands get anywhere past my knees, so it's probably going to tense up and hurt this time. It's thinking, how do I wiggle my hips so that they draw out the letter S? That's funny. And it suddenly doesn't see that movement as a threat. It's not predicted moving in that way before. So that's one of my go-to exercises, and it's playful for people. They find it fun, and I think a lot of getting people to start to think of their body in a much more visual way. So I did some excellent training with a lady who is actually a professional dancer and who now uses dance to help people recover from pain. And I remember she said, imagine that you've got smoke kind of trickling up your back and it's warm, and see if you can give it a color, and see now if you can start to sort of move your spine so that the smoke is kind of wafting up to one side of you, and then can you move your body so that the smoke is wafting up the other side, and then can you take your body back and around so that the smoke is in front of you or centered right through your spine. And it just starts to give the person a much more gentle and curious way to start to think about how their body might move.
I love this so much because it makes me think of natural learning patterns that we have as children. If you were to try and teach a child to walk by having them do it cognitively, of like, you're supposed to have your foot and going for this perfect way of doing it. You're supposed to have, transfer your weight to here and then lead, and analyze what you're doing. It would be terrible. And it would take them a really long time to learn to walk. But all the things that we learn in that under 5 is through play and experimentation and desire and what feels good in the body. So, and this is what we do with teaching people how to overcome their fear in water and swimming, it's tapping into this natural innate way that your brain has to problem solve and discover. And I can very much see how the standard prescribed exercises, I mean, I know for me, it triggers right away my perfectionism or my, like I'm supposed to do it this long every day. And then, you get into the whole piece of beating yourself up when you miss a day, like getting it wrong or.
And that if it hurts somehow that, you must be so terribly broken because you're trying to do it, but it still hurts. So what on earth is wrong with you? And why can't anybody find the problem? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I love this idea. And this is something that anybody can do right now is just be creative with playing with how your body can move a little bit and what feels good into the body. And that would make a huge difference. I don't think we give ourselves enough time or space or permission to just to have fun and to feel good in our bodies.
Definitely. I totally agree with you.
This is a beautiful thing for helping people along with this. The other thing that stood out to me with what you said is this idea of coming back to a set point. You use the word set point. When we're teaching people how to swim or how to operate in their lives, we're talking about Calm Within, right? That's the name of our program, Calm Within Adult Swim. And when I talk about what it means to swim, one of the pieces of the definition is that you can return to calm when something unexpected has happened, because it does, like you said. But this is predicated on the idea that we're at that set point, that we know what that is, that that I find, certainly in the water and in our lives, we're operating, if calm is at 0 and total stress is 100, people are operating consistently in, 50, 60 range as feeling like that's the set point. Do you have ways that you're helping people find their set point or reset that set point?
This is so key, absolutely, because a lot of the people that I work with are women. They're very capable women. They're very driven, determined, and to all intents and purposes, they're successful. They're sort of achieving a lot in life. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, with that comes this tendency to be in quite a consistent high stress state. And actually, it's something I do recognize in myself when I think back to, that initial phase of healing took place before COVID-19 hit. But when we started to have the lockdown here in the UK, again, there was suddenly just quite a lot more time in my diary, so to speak. And I remember distinctly sometimes just thinking, I don't even know what it is that I want. I don't know what my preference is on something. I've sort of become so out of tune with what I think, what I'd like to do, what I need. So, yes, I think the first thing with this stress responsiveness is learning to recognize when we're in that stress state. And I think there's lots of subtle cues. So I talk often about jaw clenching, noticing that you're biting your teeth together, breath holding. So sometimes, people are tapping away at the computer. And, I've learned all of this from being there myself. And you suddenly think, am I even breathing? Am I just doing really shallow, tiny breaths? Or, have I just been holding it for 30 seconds or so? What the pelvic floor is doing is very insightful. And actually sort of toileting habits tell us quite a lot about the stress state that people are in. And of course, getting clues from things like sleep, how easy it is to drop off to sleep. So I think the first thing is awareness. I think the next thing is starting to tap into things that we know truly relax us and give us a sense of rest and recuperation, and starting to make some space in our day or our week where we intentionally allow ourselves to do whatever activity it is. So it might be taking a really hot bath, it might be going for a walk, it might be watching a certain TV program or putting on a certain piece of music. And so I often suggest to clients that they might like to write almost a menu of things that they, find relaxing and restorative. And then when you kind of get to either you notice you're in that stress state, or when you get to that part of the day or the week where you think, I've scheduled this time for me, you can sort of have a look through and think, yes, what's it going to be? You know, a TV program or a hot bath or whatever, and start to intentionally give yourself that time. Unfortunately, I don't think we're just going to suddenly find that we're less stressed. We have to be intentional about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it makes me think back to that story we were talking about with the guy who got bit by the snake, right? That coming back into the body, into the reality, this is how he finds out it was a twig, right? That coming into the visual space, coming into feeling in, is there actually something wrong with my body? What do I, of landing in my body? And I love that practice. That is an amazing practice, because having a list of, these taking time for yourself can be rather stressful in and of itself. I'm supposed to have time for myself.
It's like another thing to do. But I tell you where it comes in handy. So often I think as women, we're working, women are raising families, or they're supporting a partner, or they're looking after pets, and they're keeping the home. And you get to the end of the day, and there's this kind of just desire to just flop onto the sofa, whatever, fine. But what so many people then do is get out the phone, and then they're just scrolling through social media and checking the emails and whatever. And that is not productive rest. We're kind of seeking this time to switch off and zone out, but we're trying to do it through our phone. And I think if there's that sense of, oh my goodness, I just need to flop and give myself 10 minutes. But what is it that you actually need? Let's not just get out the phone as this default, dopamine hit from just scrolling. Actually, I need to go and sit in a warm bath, or actually I need to just read a book and just get away from the news and whatever. So I think that's where it's useful, is then trying to swap whatever we're currently doing to try and relieve stress, probably ineffectively, for something that's really going to top us up a bit more.
Absolutely. That I love, because there's a whole science around that, around this dopamine hit that we're getting that is actually leading us to be more depressed, keep having the dopamine drop. And so having a baseline of these activities and ways of being and understanding how it feels to be in our body, and have that be a normal place. So we're not having these huge drops all the time from something like social scrolling and what happens in the science of that addiction. And that we're building up. I love the idea that we can build up in these mini moments of taking the breath, of feeling into your body, taking in those five senses. And then you also have this longer regenerative true rest opportunities as well, built in for yourself. Beautiful. I love it. Well, how can folks get a hold of you? Are you doing work online? What do you have for us there in this podcast
Absolutely.
space where we're listening from all over the world?
Oh, it's so wonderful. I mean, this is just the wonder, isn't it, of the internet, the chance to meet and connect to others.
On the internet.
The good part of scrolling is that I found you. Yes, so I am absolutely open to working with clients in an online capacity. So if people would like to have a little look at my work, then I'm over on Instagram at Nadine, Nadine, Chiro, as in chiropractor, Chiro, Nadine Chiro. And my website is www.nadinechiro.com. And I can also be emailed, Nadine at nadinechiro.com. And I'm on Facebook as well with the same handle, at Nadine Chiro. So I guess if you're intrigued to know a little bit more, just reach out, get in touch, and I can share the different ways to work with me from there. But there's options to work with me one-to-one, and I'm also hoping to have a group program coming later this year.
Oh, very good. Very good. Nice. I love it. And of course, all that will be in the show notes for people to not have to remember one more thing in their lives.
Yes, exactly.
So
Sorry about that.
yeah, that's okay. Sometimes it's good to hear it, right? To get it a little bit anchored in our brain, but then have the safety of knowing I can go back to show notes and click through
Yes.
there and
Well, if
grab
you're
it.
anything like me, I listen to podcasts when I'm driving.
Yes, exactly. Yep. Very good. Well, thank you so much. These were lovely tips, and I really enjoyed us getting to have that deeper think about of where the pain comes from and how we process that. So thank you for being on today and for
Thank you.
going through my own nervous system overreaction with my coughing earlier.
Oh, it was a pleasure, and I really enjoyed the questions that you asked. And yeah, it's been great to share some of my strategy with you and your listeners. So thank you.
Great.
I hope it helps somebody listening today.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. All right. Thank you.